Hello and welcome to A Lot of Help with James Lott Jr. I'm James Lott Jr. Yeah, exactly. Here on JLJ Media. I'm the JLJ of JLJ Media. Welcome to the show. I love having conversations of all kinds. I really do. And on this show, that's what we do here. And we give you ideas and concepts and give you conversations for you to listen to if you're listening on the audio podcast world or watch and listen on YouTube at JLJ Media. And I have a guest, somebody I actually have known for a long time, but we have never done a show together. So I knew him when we both were at the AfterBuzz TV world. And many of my fans, you guys know, AfterBuzz TV is how you met me also, beginning. He's also America's Life Coach. I love that title. I love it. He's an author, too, of How to Find Yourself, Love Yourself, and Be Yourself. We're going to talk about faith, what that means in the world today. And you guys get to know him a little bit more, too. And it's Stephen Lovegrove. I love his last name. Hi, Stephen.
Hello, and you will appreciate how hallmarky of a name Lovegrove is. I
Love
hated it as a kid because, of course, when you're little, anything that's different about you, you get picked on. But I embrace it as an adult, and I am so happy we're doing this.
Maybe I love the name Love Gravity. It is very Hallmark esque and it much is it is. Um,
And nobody asked me if it was a stage name before I moved to California just about a decade ago, because it really is just my biological name. I wish I had come up with it, but no, I started getting asked in the California days. It is in fact my name.
yes, in the world of stage names, you're right. It is your name. I like it's and because you're a coach and stuff, and you're spreading love to the world. Like, oh, okay, I get what's going on here. Yeah, but it's like, no, that's his name. I love it. And it's Stefan, not Steven, folks. Somebody told me, oh, you're thinking of Steven like this. That's not his name. Yes, his name is Stefan. I'm sure you get that mistake all the time. I'm sure, don't you?
And I'm also just so used to it that now it's a battle in my head. Even if I'm on the phone with customer service or something, it's like, do I care enough to correct it? Or is this a one time customer service call and we can let it go? I'm always trying to decide.
I love it. I do. I love it. Well, welcome to the show. I've been asking everybody this. Just how are you doing these days?
You know, I have to tell you, I hate to date this recording, but at the time of this recording, I feel like it is early in the year 2024. And I have to say, I don't know that I can credit this to one particular thing alone, but I am just feeling so good about this year. And I will even say that in contrast to, I remember how I felt January 2023, and I just did not. I didn't really feel great at that time. B, I did not feel super positive about the year as a whole. And I think it was I think it was a tough year for a lot of people in my world, a lot of clients. I think it was a growing year for many people. By the time it was done, I was describing it kind of as a roots year where a lot of people had to go back to the roots, strengthen the roots, replace the roots. But all of that to say, after getting through what was a challenging at times 2023, I'm feeling very thankful and very optimistic about this year.
Um, you just said you're not sure. Are you not sure why you feel good, or you just? All right. Do you know what's contributing to you feeling good about this year?
Well, okay, let me answer that a little bit more nuance. I think part of why I said that is I guess I do feel like it makes sense for me personally because I know the inner work and growth and healing that happened even in 2023 to get me to feeling like this. I think the part that's more of a mystery to me is a lot of my clients and a lot of people in my world seem to feel more optimistic in 2024. And what's funny to me about that is, in terms of the headlines or the current events or the whatever, there's always going to be some type of conflict, some type of not good stuff happening in the world, some reason to be afraid. So that's, I think, the part that fascinates me is when I think about what was going on in the world, January 2023 versus January 2024, I'm not sure that there's like a good explanation for why that shifted in the collective. That part is still a little bit of a mystery to me, but I'm happy to be in a good space and I'm happy for anyone who's in a good space.
I like that answer. No, it was a rough year for me family wise, and it's funny you say that because
Mm.
I learned about caregiving. I used to be a nurse. I
Mm,
was a graduate nurse years ago. Being a nurse is one thing to patients. Caregiving parents is a different thing. And I really
mm,
learned, I'm going to write a book on it actually. The true story of how it is, how one person's way, because caregiving is different for everybody. But I've been doing talks on it, and I'm actually doing a talk next week in San Diego on it. It's a very interesting thing in relation to yourself, how you fit in all this when you're physically caregiving someone, when you have power of attorney of someone, when you're going through. I went
mm,
through death while the other person was dying. Someone, it was very heavy stuff. But as I come out, but it was like once we got to December 2023, it was like I just want to get over the hump to 2024 so badly. And I felt what you just said there. I feel like a lot of people I knew were the same. We're like, let's just get to 2024. And it does seem a little bit. It seems a little calmer. I know I'm in a better position than I was this time last year, but it's calmer. Yes, there's like you said, there's stuff going on in the world and stuff, but I did learn a lot, and it just folks, and I say it to my clients too. The education stops when you die. Otherwise,
mm.
you still even after that you learn stuff after if you believe. We'll talk about that in a second. You learn stuff like that. But and while you're on Earth, every time you wake up, there's a chance to learn. There's always a chance to learn something, and it doesn't stop at 30. It doesn't stop at 40. It keeps going. And so to look back on my year of hardship, I can also smile and go, I learned a whole new skill set. I learned a whole new thing about myself. It was very interesting. So I agree with you. Like this is like a much smoother. I feel good. I've been feeling good for the last week or so. But like this is a good. It's a good week.
Which is a great feeling to have. We're happy to be there.
Yes. Well, you learn to be present. I mean, that's the whole thing. I mean, you always. I know folks at home here to say, "Be present, be present, be present." But it really does work, and it really is something that I fully believe in completely. In terms of just everything and presence and grace are two things. I just was like, those are two things I learned the most in the last couple of years. It's like you have to have both just to get through anything. I mean, how do you feel about that? I'm just like, how do you feel? I'm like, I think being present and having grace in your life are two of the things that can help you get through stuff. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, and I think back to how many people in 2020 were so excited about 2020 and they're the year of perfect vision and all of these things. And I don't know if on one hand people are suffering from a little bit of emotional PTSD, if you will, about this, and if on the, it feels like though maybe in a healthy way we learn the lesson that you can't calculate or perfectly script or perfectly plan for everything that a year is going to bring. And I do think the last couple years that we've all been through, I think it was a wake up call for a lot of people that, these things are not locked in or certain or promised. Life is a gift, it's very precious, and we don't know. None of us know exactly how much time we have left. None of us know exactly what the future is going to bring. And so I think maybe in a healthy way, there's a power a lot of people have found in one moment at a time, one day at a time. But I think it's interesting to observe going into a new year, or, we could even say a new chapter, a new season of your life at any point, with less pressure on it of like, it's got to be this and I've got to do all these things. I think people are a little more open handed. And I think presence and grace are, very good words for that feeling of, I think, a greater openness a lot of people are living with.
What are your thoughts on I know in a lot of the coaching world, the circles that I run in, they're dropping what do you see your life in 5 years? What do you see your life in 10 years? Like that's starting to drop. How are you feeling about that kind of stuff?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I've always kind of traversed in multiple different lanes and worlds of coaching, but always kind of with a bent to the spirituality crowd. If we were to map it out in Los Angeles, always with a slight bent toward that west side. We like our woo-woo stuff. But what's interesting is that world has always been, I think, a little bit less achievement, big, hairy, audacious goals, plan it all out. That world has always been a little less oriented to that than maybe a lot of the more corporate coaching world or etc.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think partly we have had to come to terms with change is really one way that I would say it.
Yeah.
And speaking of woo woo, I'll do a little astrology shout out for my astrology people out there. But the
Okay.
the astrology people will say that we are about to move into a 20-year era. And the last time that we went through this was a couple hundred years ago. And the last time that our planet, our species, humanity went through this era, we had the French Revolution, we had the Industrial Revolution, the scientific method developed, the Enlightenment, all of these things that changed the way we fundamentally viewed the world, right? And I think it's not hard to put two and two together here. It makes sense to me, just based on the news, if you will, that we're approaching another era like that, because I think things like AI are about to be that big of a sea change for the world. And so I think part of what it is, let's say we just talk about the realm of business for a moment. I see a lot of the behind the scenes of many of the top business people out there. And I will tell you, everybody has gone back to the drawing board in some big ways over the past year or two. I mean, even Tony Robbins, we'll use one of the biggest examples out there. Even Tony Robbins built a studio in the basement and now does virtual events, which is something I don't think anybody would have ever expected he would want to do 5 years ago, right? And even I think during the pandemic, I think some people would have said, this is a subpar option. This is not the ideal. If we can do in person, of course, we're fully going to go back to it. And the world changed, not in all the ways that everybody was afraid it would, but it did change in significant ways, and many that have stuck. And so I think part of it is we are all coming to, I think, again, a very healthy acceptance of this element of change. And if you plan out the next 10 years, I think, let me say it this way. I think thinking with a 10-year kind of vision in mind is good for certain areas, right? I do believe that's good for fitness. I do believe that's good for your investments. If you never think long-term, you will never invest money, right? I think there are areas where that thinking is important. But I think what we're also recognizing is you're not really in control, and there's a lot you can't plan for, and there is this element of change.
Very good. I like that. No, well, you are America's life coach. No, I like that. I do. I like it a lot. That's because I feel like you can always look big picture, long term, but the last 4 years, if they've taught us nothing else, you have to pivot and change in a moment. And I don't know about you, but I got more clients in 2020 and 2021. I got a lot of clients all of a sudden. It was like I had a big flux. People were like, I gotta go back to the drawing. I gotta look at what I guess they all started coming to me to start again and like to look at some other options and figure stuff out. And so I mean I had kind of had a good year that year money wise. I was like I didn't have to worry so much. But it was like, oh, people were going, yeah, I'm not working right now. We don't know what's gonna happen. Maybe I should do that. So it was very interesting. People were looking inward, which I love that. I love people look. I mean, everything starts inward. Everything starts from the inside out. I mean, that's how it starts, right? Not the outside in. So I loved that. The last 4 years has brought that. Thank
Well,
you
and
very
the
much.
funny thing to me is when we look back on 2020, people were so scared that their business was going to go downhill in that year. And yet, I do think for many people it was the opposite. I certainly experienced what you're talking about. And to me, there's a principle in that of change is just a rearranging. And this is a very gentle paradigm that I like to come back to. Change is just a rearranging of things. And if you view it as inherently a loss, if you view it as it must be the death of something, if you view it as something is being taken from me, right? There are ways that we can view change that make it inherently more or less painful, right? But at the core, change is just a rearranging. And one of the things I found is, for example, money is always going to be circulating. And whenever something changes in the world, in the economy, in the industry, the question I always want to ask is, in what ways and in what directions are things rearranging? Because often it won't be all good or all bad. It just is. But if we can get curious about where is it rearranging? Where is the money going now? And that's what I'm trying to figure out with all of the change that is out of our hands and beyond our control right now. But I still, I still think it's fun to think about and speculate and predict. With all of the ways the change is going, where do I see things rearranging? And so, for example, I see that in a world of increasing AI, people having a genuine emotional connection is only going to matter more and more. And I predict as things rearrange, but to me, that's where you always find the opportunity and the possibility is, okay, so it's rearranging. As I sometimes say, the particles are moving in particle land. They're all rearranging. So where are they going now? And that's where I want to be, is on the, on the expansion end of the rearranging.
I know I always say, sometimes during tragic moments, beautiful, useful things are born. It's happened in history many times. Out of something bad, something good comes out of it. Something new comes out of it. It's a rebirth of sorts. Also, I found a lot of my clients, they found themselves, as coaches, we have these different things you can do to get to your core. And many of them found out they were complacent in their lives. So the pandemic really made them have to look at it. They go, I just ran my business a certain way. I'm picking back up what you just said. It's so true. They were like, I ran my business for 5 years a certain way, and it was fine. But now I'm forced to figure out another way to run the business. And it forced them to think. It forced them to unlock these things they never thought about before. And many of them did survive. They found very interesting ways to keep their businesses open. I personally, I'm a professional organizer and as well as a life coach, super organizer. And the organizer world stopped. Couldn't go to anybody's houses. So we can't actually go in the garages, go in there. LA shut down, like it's shut down. So we were like, and I've been in business 15 years. So I started talking, I'm one of the elders in the business. So I started talking to people. Virtual organizing became a thing. It became where we can talk you through certain systems through Skype or Microsoft Teams or Zoom and help you, give you direct directions on how to organize certain things. And it's made us think too. We were complacent. We'll just come to your house and we'll come to your office or we'll just take care of it. But when we couldn't physically go to your house yet. Especially in LA, it was like 6 months before you could start doing it again, before the whole all this stuff was happening. It was like we had to really think about it because we're like, this is our business we're talking about now. And it made us start to think in different ways and tap parts of our brain. We just lazily didn't, nothing bad, but just like we just didn't touch it.
Well, and that's, autopilot can be a dangerous place to be. And I think it is such a gift to be knocked out of autopilot.
Yes.
Actually, what I will say this is like a more so me than necessarily clients, but as a personal observation, I will say, I feel like I actually do really well with a limited time, crisis or emergency or unexpected situation. I feel like I know how to roll with it and embrace it is what it is and do my best with it. What's been interesting to me is, so 2020 knocked a lot of people out of autopilot. And again, I think always a gift, even if we don't like it at the time, always a gift in the end to be knocked out of autopilot. But what I found was an unexpected challenge that I didn't anticipate is when suddenly everything reopened and, social life is picking back up. There's a million things we could do. I found it at times difficult to figure out, what do I want to establish now? Because now I feel like I'm not really just going back to the old, but now I'm establishing a new rhythm. And that is its own challenge in and of itself. But I still stand by, it is a gift to have to get out of autopilot, whether you want to or not.
Completely agree. And you're right. The integration of the old with the new, because we were in a new world. I mean, literally, we were in a new world. And in big cities like LA or New York or Chicago or Atlanta or San Francisco that I would go to during we were still in the pandemic stages, it was different. And I'll tell you, Zoom, I wish I had stock in the company beforehand because I'm like, why did I not know Zoom was going to take off? Like I didn't even heard of Zoom before. It's AfterBuzz TV actually. They're like, put Zoom on your phone before you and Zoom changed my life. Later, StreamYard, but it's all these other things. Super. It's like, who knew this virtual world was going to save us? I mean, I can say personally for myself, the virtual world, I created a whole new channel, a whole new company It saved me. It kept me sane. I was one of the first ones right away that said, okay, I'm going to do 5 shows a day, 5 days a week, take the weekends off. So I gave myself purpose. So I was doing 5 interviews a day. I did 25 interviews a week the first like 5 months. There's me and another guy, Alan Locker. We shout to Alan Locker. We were out there doing all the soap stuff because everybody was at home, Stefan. Everybody was sitting at home not doing shit anyway. So we were all at home. And I was like, hi, come on my show. Hi, all the actors and writers, producers. And we had the most amazing conversations because everything had stopped. So my shows felt richer because we had time to talk. Everybody had time. Nobody was in a rush to do it. Like, we had time to talk. We had time to express ourselves. We had time to give the audience behind the scenes stuff and encouragement and all that stuff. But it kept me sane. And it was like, so the virtual world itself, that was new. Before I was in studios, before I was like red carpets, where that had changed for a while. So now I am back to red carpets, not the daytime memories. I'm back to the red carpets, but I'm also doing this at the same time. So it's like now we're integrating both. And for a lot of us, it's low overhead. For a lot of us, it's like being in traffic in Los Angeles, trying to drive across at 4 p.m. to try to get to the valley. It's changed a lot and brought some opportunity. So I agree with you. It's been a wonderful. I mean, it's not been. Yes, it's a tough time for a lot, but for some of us, it actually did work and became a wonderful thing. I want to make sure I say both.
So this has sparked a thought for me. I was thinking about how you did the 5 days or 5 shows a day. Did I hear right? 5 shows a day, 5 days a week, right? And this just sparked a thought for me because I do know that there's certainly people listening or watching who are trying to figure out what they want to do as a career. Maybe they're in a pivot. Maybe they are, still trying to find their purpose, whatever it is. And I think this is really a key here is if you can find a thing that you want to spend your time doing 25 times a week, even when you don't have to, that's a really good indication. But I say this because, one thing that I think needed a correction in the kind of online entrepreneur world is everyone and their mother had bought into 4-hour work week at some point. And listen, I am all for systems and delegations and smarter, not harder. But yes, I think something got missed where it made people think that like the goal is to escape or the goal is to do as little as possible. And this is just my personal paradigm. I can't speak for everyone, but I would say the goal is not to do as little as possible. The goal is to find the thing that you really do get energy from doing. And that even if you are spent after a long day of doing it, you feel so satisfied and so fulfilled with how you're doing it. And so anyway, that just really struck me as you were talking about the 5 shows a day, 5 days a week, because that's what people want to be looking for is the thing that they have a natural tank of enthusiasm for.
Oh, no, Stefan, let me tell you something. So reason why I'm even in this world was 15 years ago, I left a corporate job I hated after being there for 11 years. But one of the things I admired while doing that corporate job was that all my bosses, it was insurance, all my bosses, everybody in there, they love talking insurance. We go to dinner, go to lunch, and they love talking insurance. On the weekends, they're sharing insurance articles with each other. I was like, and I always wondered, will I find that? I really did back in the day. I was like, I always wondered, because you're right. That's what you want. You want to find something where you're just like, I can eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff. I want it. It's like it makes me. They would smile when a new regulation went through, like so to speak. And I was like, I found it. I found it. Every single thing. Like I told myself at 40, I said out loud, James Lott Jr., you will never do a job you don't want to do ever again. And I told myself, because I had to take jobs. I raised 2 girls, and there were things I had to take when I was younger because you had to take them. Things I had to do. I wasn't rich. I was on my own, trying to survive. But I said, I am 40 years old. The kids are grown. They got good jobs. I'm single. I'm on my own. I had a relationship that ended, and I was like, I'm going back to Los Angeles from San Francisco. I'm coming down here, and I'm going to start my life at 40. But I said, but number one, your goal, my goal was to not take any job I did not want to take anymore. And my friends thought I was crazy. And this, people say, well, it's not, nope. don't put that in your brain. I'm sure you're like me. I believe in words and thoughts and actions. And I'm like, no, there is no plan B, so to speak. There's no plan B. This is what I'm going towards. That was my basic goal. I didn't know what I was going to do yet. But my basic goal was to make sure that any job I took was something that I could actually enjoy and feel good about. And I've done that actually. There's no jobs I can think of right now from the last 15 years I've taken that I was like, I mean, I've had some sad experience on a few things here and there, but there were jobs I wanted. They're all jobs I wanted, and I was able to walk away from them. And I think that's an important intention to make, whatever your intention is going to be. But I'm like you, I'm very basics. I'm like, just that's what I wanted. Find where I could talk about it, and I did find it. I found several mediums that I work in that, because I've been a life coach for I think now 8 years, organizer 15, media for 17. Like I found several things that I do that I love all of them. That I could do, I could talk until do anything. So that was always my goal. Like folks talking about, I had friends who loved golfing or whatever. They talk about golfing all the time. Like I don't have anything like, I was like, I don't have anything like that that I could talk about all the time. And now I found it.
Well, all of that makes me so happy. And I'm so glad that you just said that, because I pray that that paradigm inspires people who are settling and listening to this, that they can ask for more, they can receive more, they can have more. One thing I was struck by is there are people who can get enthusiastic about insurance. Now, I've never heard that example before, but I loved it.
Trust me, they do.
But I wanted to say this because that is actually true about all the things that other people are putting up with as jobs that they hate. There are people who love the law. There are people who love taxes. There are people who love finances, any area that we could name. And I think, I always go back to the moment that I was in high school and I was at a friend's house, and my friend's dad came in the kitchen after a long day of work, and he worked at a factory job, small town, southern United States. And he came in, and at some point in the conversation, I just remember it so clearly, I can visualize the room we were in. He said, boys, the truth is nobody likes work. That's why they call it work, but you just have to go anyway. And I remember, I can't even explain why I felt this so clearly or had this knowing at the time, but I just remember when he said that, it was kind of like I saw my life split into two paths, and I wasn't into coaching yet. I couldn't have articulated like people's belief system are creating their life. I couldn't have articulated all that. But when he said that, it was like my life in my mind was split into two, a fork in the road of paths. And I suddenly saw, if I accept this idea, and by the way, people are saying ideas all the time that are not objectively true. It's just their belief, their paradigm, what they're experiencing. Yeah. I had this thought, if I accept this idea, it's going to put me on a path and my life is going to look one way. But that's not the only option. And I don't think I have to. And I think work is one of those things where there's a lot of paradigms out there that people have been given that say nobody likes it. You just got to do it for a paycheck. We're all just stuck in the capitalist machine, whatever it is. There's so many paradigms out there. And, I'm just so happy that you shared a paradigm that I know for some people will be a little bit like confronting to them because it's so different than what they're living. But it really is a paradigm that is available and true. And I'm just so happy you articulated it.
Yeah, thank you. No, and trust me, folks, it wasn't, I just think it was easy. But see, faith comes in there. We're going to talk about that in a little bit also, and why. And I'll tell you how things keep me going. But I want to ask you a question, because I like to ask this of people who are like me. Does your family get what you do? Do they see it as do you see it as real jobs? Do they see it? Are they supportive? Are they kind of like, we support you, but we're not sure what exactly? Like, because I don't, we don't have I don't have a 9-to-5 job that's Monday through Friday kind of thing. I mean, we're entrepreneurs, we're coaches, we do different things, we're entertainers or whatever. Do they get what you do?
So,
yes.
Complicated answer.
I love complicated answers. It's always, I love it. Yes. Share what you want to
nuanced
share.
Answer, right?
Yeah, share what you want to
share. So here's one thing I've often said to clients. People often don't get it until long after you stop needing them to.
Yes.
And it's interesting because in the fragile, vulnerable early years, I felt like nobody took what I was doing seriously. I felt like nobody thought I should be doing it. I felt like nobody took the vision seriously. Now, here's the interesting thing. I'm not saying that it should be this way or shouldn't, but it is. Money validates in people's minds and success validates in people's minds. And when I crossed a certain threshold and when I was able to show up a different way and even give back to the family in a different way, I got different reactions and different responses and even some new curiosity. I would still say this, though. I do think there's a respect there. And I do think there's some level of basic understanding, again, that maybe came with a curiosity that they could have had at the beginning but didn't. But what I will say is, I also think it's really helped me that I don't put the burden on family, or I would even say, I don't put the burden on friends that they have to get everything that I do. And that's been very freeing to me. I know who I best work with. I know who my ideal client is. I know who my audience is typically anywhere that I'm speaking. And it's not family members. And that's not a shady thing to say. It's just, it's not. And so I actually think it's really helped me to not have this pressure of, I need them to get it. I need them to, even on a friendship level, I think it's healthy. Like, we talked off air before we started recording about this idea of having a fan base, having an audience, having a community. I think it gets weird when people surround themselves with just fans. Like the only people in their life are like fans. That's not healthy. I don't think that's a good dynamic. So I think it can be really healthy to even have friends that are not into personal development, don't really understand it, don't really whatever, but not having the pressure that I need them to get it for some reason has really freed me.
Well, I know that, I both know this. It all goes into the people pleasing thing that some people have, the validation seeking that some people have. You're right. When I first started, I was just like, nobody gets what I'm doing. You guys are not that. Or they would say little things like, well, James, if you had a real job, you wouldn't have to worry about the rent this month. The early years, I got that stuff, but you're right. I could argue there's certain, and what's funny, here's what's funny. Success is different for every single person. So I'll do this one thing and a group will be like, oh my God, you've made it. But yet this other group is like, whatever. Then I do this one thing over here and they're like, oh my God, you made, like, I've noticed that also. I've had a couple of people, well, it's not secrets, but people know things I've done. I was on Jimmy Kimmel Live, made history on that a few years ago. And that was like a huge, people from high school, like, oh my God, I knew him in high school. Like, it was like that. That's when they thought I made it, even though for like 14 years I've been out here, I was doing it before that. Or when I was on Let's Make a Deal, they're like, oh my God. Or when I was in Forbes magazine, oh my, I've noticed the success part is very different while you're an entrepreneur building your life. And I'm telling myself, well, success is I can do this another day. That's success. Success is I paid the water bill. That's success. Success is I have a garden and I'm able to take care of it. Like, I view success differently, and I'm sure you too. We just do. But we were outside. I was going to say the civilians outside. I'm finding what they see, and what they say to me at family get-togethers are like, "This cousin James, he's the guy who had brand new refrigerator on TikTok with 80 million views." Like, I can see which ones they choose as success, and that's interesting to me. Coming out into the world, going, "Oh, you think that's why I'm successful?" I'm thinking, I've had a business 15 years. That's success. Like, that's successful. I'm not like destitute. That's successful. But have you found that just? It's very. You said that triggered my thing of like, yeah, they see certain things, and then it's like that success.
Well, and it just shows you how fickle it is. And listen, some of it is like fun or fun to laugh at. Cause it is funny how subjective it is. Like, I remember one year somebody told me, like, Stephen, my kids saw that Louis Vuitton bag you had and they were instantly sold. They instantly loved you. That's all it took was that bag. And then, but the same year, somebody else was not phased by the bag, but this was before the Meta verified whatever, and they were like blue check. Oh my God, you have a blue check, and that was a thing. And then someone else, a chef at an event, came up to me and was like, I am so sorry to do this, but I just have to. My family loves Love is Blind. We are obsessed. And I just had I won't name the person, but she asked, how is so and so in real life? And everybody has their different things. But I will tell you what where that leads me, where that makes me end up at is realizing I better do this from internally sourced motivation for a deeper reason that actually matters to me, because all the fickle external stuff is not what's going to ultimately satisfy you or make it worth it. I kind of use the example that when I first got to California, I was just enamored. I had been as a kid, like my grandma's from out here. So I had been on Walk of Fame, Disneyland, whatever, but I'm there for the first time as an adult. And I remember I just felt like, City of Stars. Oh my God. And so the first couple times, this is so embarrassing, but I love telling this story, even though it's embarrassing. The first couple weeks that I was in California, anytime it would be like a Saturday night or even a Tuesday night, because, movie premieres, but anytime it would be any night and there were searchlights in the sky, I was like, oh my God, searchlights, something exciting is happening tonight. And I'm ashamed, but not really, because life is too short for shame. But I will admit, there were 3 instances in those first couple weeks in California where I drove to see, like, let me just see if I can follow these lights. Let's see what's going on. And when I tell you, it was the most disappointing outcomes. One of them was a strip club opening. One of them was a teenager's bar mitzvah. One of them was a casino. And I just remember thinking, and it's funny because this metaphor, though, has always stuck with me, that if you live your life chasing the searchlights and the spotlights, you will always end up disappointed. And the funny thing is, LA is actually an amazing place to live. I love it. I feel more happy to be here at this point than I did 8, 9, 10 years ago. So I love LA, and I've gotten to experience so many things here, but not by chasing searchlights. And that is kind of a metaphor that just has always stuck with me about knowing what matters and knowing what doesn't and what you pursue.
I love that, Stephen. I do. I'm also gagging over your apartment. I'm just like, I love the view. I mean, I love all of that behind you. I love it.
Well, I was in Nashville part-time for a couple of years, and that was my first taste of like high-rise apartment living, and I realized that I was obsessed.
I love it.
So I switched in the pandemic, and I love it.
Wait, we just had the torrential rain recently. What's it like being? Like, I've never been that high up in an apartment or a house or anything. I mean, not to live. I've been in places. How's it hit up there? The rain hit up there.
So, I mean, really, the main problem is you have to clean the balcony afterwards. And I will say it does get windy beyond. Usually the worst winds are not even during the rain. It does get windy up here. So one thing I do have to explain to people is people will come over and they'll be like, you could put this on your balcony. You could put this on your balcony. And I'm like, sweetie, thank you so much for that feedback. I thought the same thing when I moved in, but you don't understand. I have seen chairs go flying around. Now, here's the thing. This building was very well designed, and shout out to the developers that built it. It was very well designed. The railing is like almost at a perfect height where nothing blows over no matter what. It's very, very well designed somehow. But the wind gets intense. So I don't want to have plants out here because the pot will shatter, etc. Like, so that is one thing with the rain, or I guess more specifically the wind. But really, I mean, I've gone through earthquakes here. I've gone through the storm cycles. I've gone through whatever. I generally feel pretty solid.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I just want to mention that for a second, because of course sometimes that's important too, where you live and your space. because that's your safe haven. That's your safe.
Especially working from home. I think
Yeah.
that
Yes.
also changed in the pandemic a lot for people. Even my brother who lives in New York cares about his being at home space. And New York, if there was ever a city where you don't
Right.
need to care about it. But I
So,
think that we all, if you do work from home even part-time now, you're more likely to care about it a little bit more.
so I need to say that quickly for me. As an organizer, that was the number one request for help in 2020 was I'm realizing I should have got my house together before this because they had to work from home. A lot of them had to work from home. And I have no room.
Mm.
Where am I going to do it at? Should I do it in the kitchen? Should I do it in the service port? So I was helping people create workspaces. That was one thing. That was one of the main things that kept me busy was helping them carve out a healthy workspace for them. And but that was I kept saying, I kept telling you guys we should start, now and get these your house together so that when anything happens, you'll be ready. So it created a lot of work for me that year. But that was the number one thing was creating workspaces. They found out, wow, you're right, James. Putting systems in place, it does work, doesn't it? Yes, it does work. I'm not lying to you. It does. So that was very
Well,
interesting.
and that is such just a universal principle that if you can choose to put the systems in place before you need them, before something goes wrong, before it's an emergency, you will thank yourself
Yes.
or
All
you
right,
will
where
regret.
where where is Stefan from? Where are you from originally?
South Carolina.
SC. My stepfather is from Rock Hill. I was like near Columbia or whatever.
So that is where I graduated from college. I went to Winthrop. So Rock Hill is
Did you know
very
Tony
familiar
Moore?
to
You know
me.
Tony Moore then, right? Tony Moore was AfterBuzz also.
I don't know him personally because we were years off in Winthrop, but I definitely know who he is.
Yeah. So you're the second person. Besides my family members who went to
Actually, actually, Tony was one of the first people I probably ever saw when somebody introduced me to AfterBuzz. Is I think maybe Tony doing RuPaul back in the day
probably. Maybe.
on AfterBuzz
Yeah.
at one point was
Yeah.
one of the first AfterBuzz things I saw.
But he's a winter person. You guys are all. I mean, I said my stepdad, who may rest in peace, he died last year. They're all from Rock Hill, Columbia, the whole thing down there. And I was like, oh, we love South Carolina.
Hmm.
What is one thing from your South Carolinian upbringing that you do carry with you?
That's a good question. It is interesting because my parents were not from the South. And do you know Bob Jones University?
Yeah.
Okay. I figured you might be familiar. It's always a grab bag toss,
Yes.
whatever the expression is, whether people know it or not.
Yes.
So my parents are not Southern really culturally. They both were the first in their family to go to Bob Jones University. They both got sent there by their parents for different reasons, ended up staying there, and then that just became their life. So it's interesting because that's like a very specific bubble and kind of a weird world to grow up in that I had a lot of like culturally Southern things around me. But also that world and my household, like I remember in fourth grade, I came home and I started saying y'all and ain't because kids in my class did, and my mom said no, we're not going to do that because my parents weren't Southern, and my
Right.
mom said no, I don't know where
Right.
you got this, but
Yeah.
this is not me. We don't do this. And I was like, but why not? It's fun. Everyone says it anyway. But you know what I will say? I feel like the things that I appreciate about the South, I would put in the category. I could call them the country music things. I could also say they're the Hallmark things.
Yes.
I think, and I used to be going back and forth. For those couple of years, I was part-time in Nashville and part-time in LA. And I think Nashville to me represented those Southern parts. A lot of the same things, I would say. It's those parts that, the person in the Hallmark movie needs to slow down a little, learn to appreciate the little things and the little moments. Family matters, relationship matters, forgiveness is always worth it. I think those kind of things are still values that I hold. So that, we can call them the Southern part, the country music values, the Hallmark values, but I think there's some things still in there from that world for sure.
Yeah, my father's from Louisiana, so I have a garden. I grow my own vegetables. I'm a horseback rider. I mean, there's things that I carry with me from the South that I love it. I've loved horses my whole life. Like, I feel like there's parts of, and then my mother's from New York, so it's like I have both sides in me. They're both not Californians. We're first generation Californians, my siblings and I. So it's like we have a lot of their stuff plus California stuff mixed together. But I can always tell certain things about them, like the food, the South. I mean, there's a lot of things I can tell.
Oh, the food is so good.
I know. I mean, it's like it's not always good for you. I'm a big boy, but it's good. But it's good. And the culture of it's made with love. Like you can tell the food is just made differently than in certain other parts of the country. I mean, I've been over the country. Just the South has a way of making food where you feel granny in there and grandpa and everybody was. I mean, you feel the taste, you feel it. So I like this. I always like to ask people, when you leave so much, you left that place for a reason. You left for whatever reasons you left for. But I feel like it's still there's parts that probably still stay with you somewhere. That's why I always ask that question. I think it's very interesting. I kind of want to lead into a little bit as I can talk to you forever, so you can tell at this point. Faith and faith-based stuff, and actually using those words in your work, online, in public, especially during the climate we have these days. So I noticed for you, you really do talk a lot about faith and some Christian values and God and all those things. And I'm just curious for you, was that a conscious decision? Was that a decision you thought about for a while and then decided to add that into your work? Or give me a little bit of that process of bringing that into your work and your online presence.
Yeah, well, it is definitely something that was conscious, but I laugh about it because it was also not in the plan. It wasn't planned when I got into the field of personal development. So it wasn't something I thought I was going to do, but by the time it happened, it was conscious. So part of my journey was I leave a very fundamentalist, very restrictive, obviously very homophobic world. And I'm in college and I'm trying to figure out what is actually true for me and what do I believe for myself. And honestly, that's a huge part of the reason I ended up in coaching, because I was in therapy at that time. And therapy was definitely helpful for me as well. But I remember during that time, I found this life coach online who had the specialty of being a gay man who really did feel very reconciled about his spirituality and was able to have those conversations with people. And that was, by the way, that was also a huge thing for me because, at least technically speaking, I'm not saying nobody does it, but at least technically speaking, one of the ideas within the therapy world is you're really not supposed to bring, as a therapist, your own beliefs into the equation. And coaching, I never felt like something was being pushed on me or whatever, but I wanted to have those conversations. And it helped me to be able to talk to a queer person who was not in turmoil about this and someone who felt resolved. And, and that's kind of what got me into coaching. So fast forward a couple of years, and I, for a while, had kind of ended up in a place of, I have a spirituality that works for me, and there's a lot of stuff I'm just not going to touch and whatever. And I mean, this is now a famous story with my community because I've told it so many times. But one day I'm on the phone with my coach, not the original coach, but a different coach who actually I've worked with and known since 2016. So shout out Danielle, I love you. But I'm on the phone with her one day and she goes, "Can I ask, is there a reason you don't use the word God?" And I was like, well, I think it's just language. And I had a very intellectual answer. And I said, I think it's really just a language thing. And we can use so many terms, and we can say God, we can say source, we can say, the universe. And she goes, okay, well, I just wanted to ask because I wondered if, and Danielle is from Brooklyn and she will just tell you like it is. So she goes, well, I just wondered if you might consciously or unconsciously not be using that word because there's a lot of pain there. And particularly, she said, I would imagine growing up in a culture where you're taught God the Father, I would imagine having a painful, relationship to family at times, that doesn't help. And I just wondered if there was an opportunity for healing there, is basically what she said. And, that was one of those moments where I'm like, can the call disconnect right now, or can we have the issues now? Why do the tech issues never happen at the right time? But all of this to say, what I started to find, and I had my own journey of healing, but even beyond that, what I started to find with clients is I have worked with so many people who grew up in some form of religion, and maybe they don't necessarily believe everything. They don't identify with it anymore. They left this, they left that. They don't talk to them anymore, whatever. But they never really resolved that piece, and they never really figured out what is actually true for me. And particularly, I kind of coined this term of God trauma when you were taught even some really harmful ideas about God, which I do believe can be traumatic to our mind and our heart and our nervous system. And so again, it's not something I ever set out to do, but I would have these conversations with people, and I would realize, if your underlying belief beneath all the things you're creating and pursuing and working on right now is that God hates you, or God is angry at you, or God is trying to block you from having what you want, that's going to get in your way every single time. And so I started to realize a lot of people had a lot of healing that needed to happen here, myself included. And so I started talking about it from that place. And it's been interesting because the number of people over the years, in recent years, who have told me, Stephen, I was so triggered by you using the God word. And I was like, this upsets me. This annoys me. Why can't he use something else? And it's not that I want anyone to be triggered. It's not that I'm trying to upset anyone. But what I realized is, there are so many people that have an opportunity for healing here. And I came to understand, it's going to look different for everybody. And I'm not here to tell somebody what they need to believe, etc. But I am aware for myself that it's part of my journey to use that language that feels like home for my soul. And I always remind people, like, that's the beautiful thing about spirituality. There are people who channel alien languages, and that's their brand. And and they, more power to them, and they can put that out there. And there's every form of spirituality out there in every single language, right? So I'm aware my language, my style, my vocabulary, my whatever is not going to be for everyone. But the long story answer here is, it is now certainly a conscious decision because of my own journey and what I've seen with clients over the years. And that's what people, I don't know if I finished the story, but that's what people ultimately tell me is, I was triggered by it initially, but for some reason I stuck around, and it really helped me. Maybe it helped my inner child to heal this wound that I didn't realize had been there for so long.
What I love about your story, and of course I have my own story too. What I love is that no one's one dimensional. And I like the fact when we can be examples to people that you can be several things. I think it's just something. I grew up in a multiracial, multicultural household, so that was always part of our lives. Coming from different, I'm bilingual, different language. I mean, always that. But then also, when you add the sexual orientation thing and lifestyle thing there with religion, and you're right, there's so much PTSD for a lot of folks. And I know a lot, especially in the Black community, and Latin community, which I'm part of both. There's a lot of where they do love God. They do want to love God. They believe in a lot of things that the teachings, and they want to feel like they can do it, but they can't because, well, I'm gay. I can't. So I know for me, I was a doctorate in divinity. And I got in 2017. And I remember so I have letters after my name, and I put them on Twitter. It kind of almost like a joke too. I have a lot of letters. So I put as many as I could on there on purpose. Just for shit, just for stuff. I put DD on there. So then people were like, you're a dentist? I'm like, no, I'm not a dentist. Or you're this? And I'm like, so what I would tell them is a doctorate in divinity. But James, but I kept hearing that is what I kept hearing. Almost the same to your thing, like that triggers me. Basically, they're saying, but, but, yes, exactly what it is. I'm like, and I tell the whole story about that, and I'm non-denominational and the whole thing, and they're like, oh, you can do that. Oh, yeah, but yeah, that can, and so sometimes it was a teaching experience, which I love. Which I know you're the same way. I love when I can share something with somebody and they learn something new that maybe they didn't know. Some folks just don't know, but others they were like, what was me putting the DD at the end, and they're going, what does that mean? And I tell them it did trigger them a lot. And I understood, like you. I was like, I totally get it why. If you want to have an open discussion, I'm here. I'm a very transparent person anyway to anybody. I'm like, you want to my fans or friends, family, you want to talk about something, open and honestly, we can talk about it. And I'm totally fine with that. So, but it's funny, like you, like it was very triggering for a lot of people too. I think they're just like, but they couldn't like some of their heads were going to explode. They couldn't understand. The other letters were like, "Oh, it's for this is my farm designation, and this is when I was a nurse, and this is my master." Like they got all that stuff, but when they were like DD, then I noticed I got a lot of attention, and then I mean I've interviewed on my shows over the years faith-based counselors. There is counseling that's faith-based. There's all Christian counseling network. There's also the faith-based lawyers. I mean, I've done people. I mean, I've actually had ministers on my show. I mean, so I was like, so I don't, and a lot of people on the Hallmark Channel and GAC Family, all this stuff. I know a lot of them, and many of them are Christian also, and many of the actors and the writers and producers, and we're all really good friends. Like we're all really good friends. So, I like you. I get how it's sometimes confusing or triggering, but I know for me, and I'm going to ask you about this too. I have seen examples. Well, one example that got me during the pandemic was for the first couple of weeks were a little weird. I was like, okay, I have a little bit of savings. You start assessing everything. I got some savings here, kind of. I got this over here. But it was like new money. That's what I was kind of like, okay, I have some stuff here. And then I had a couple of things at a time that made me money a little bit, but not a lot, but like a little bit. I have more now than before. But back then it was like I had a few things. Like new money. Okay, how can I make new money? And I just remember I always say I gave it to God, and I have no problem saying that. I gave it to Him. It's okay. You'll provide. I know I got to do my work though. I can't just sit at home and go, well, He's going to give it to me, so I just sit here and wait. No, I knew I had to go out and pivot, like we said earlier, change, not be lazy, figure out different ways of thinking. And I'll never forget. I'll never forget. It makes me laugh because I just never forget it. I had a bill come through and the amount was exactly, I'll never forget the number for the rest of my life either. It was $345.03. And I was like, I don't have the money, and it's like due in like a couple of days or whatever. I got audited from some taxes from like 10,000 years ago. And the check came in the mail for $345.03. I took pictures. I was like, I'm going to
Wow.
show people like I am not lying. This is for real. And I was like, okay, God got it. And from that point on, I was calm through the whole pandemic. Like, how are you so calm? I'm like, I mean, I know I said I had to do my part. You believe, you have faith, and then you go out there, and you try to work, you figure out how to do things. But I swear to God, to you, to the God we love, that it was exact amount to the penny. And I was like, okay, got it. I need any other proof. I need any other proof. I was like, okay, I'm sold. So I want to
Hmm.
share that story, and
Well,
that's to me.
this is an interesting point because somebody asked me earlier, I think last year, they asked me something along the lines of, Stefan, do you ever worry about like, what if you get it wrong? And I actually really do relate to this because growing up in fundamentalism, there is so much emphasis on everything hangs on you being right. And you better be right. And you better get it all right. And I would argue now, not a lot of room for grace we can notice there. But
Not at
but I
all.
really I really do get the fear. And I don't remember how we ended up at this point in the discussion, but I remember at one point I said to this wonderful individual, if you're asking me for a perfect intellectual answer here that will just once and for all convince you, answer everything, solve everything, I don't know that I have that. But I said, particularly in the context of one of the things we were discussing of, me sharing with them how I came to a place of self acceptance and knowing that God loves me as a gay person and whatever. I said, I'll be very honest with you. That's not something that I have a conviction of on mostly an intellectual level. Now, I can give you books. I mean, I'm very knowledgeable and we can talk theology all day long. But I said, even if we're talking theology, I need you to be clear that for me, this is really a heart thing, that's where I felt it. That's where I healed. That's where it shifted for me. And that's a personal experience. And nobody's two experiences are going to look exactly the same. And I respect that. But I think one thing that I am passionate about, and not that I would push on anyone, but just that I would offer to anyone who wants it is, if you were an LGBT person growing up being told that, you're an abomination, God is mad at you, God is going to punish you forever. If you're that person, what a lot of people try to do as the workaround or the resolution to that is, well, I just don't believe in God anymore. And listen, I'm not here to judge anyone's journey. I think some people really do feel resolved and at peace in that place, and that's their journey. But what I do feel like it's part of my calling to take a stand for is the people that the resolution their soul really needs is not no longer believing in God, but is knowing that God loves them deeply and permanently and unconditionally. And that's a difference. And I'm not saying everybody's path has to be that, but one of the things, doing the teachings on YouTube, that is a more recent thing for me over the last year. One of the things I've seen is there are so many people who write me, and we have a very similar experience of, I was always a very spiritual kid, but somewhere in the way, humans and childhood and pain and trauma and religion and prejudice and discrimination and whatever it was, somewhere in the way, humans got in between me and God in a way that I didn't feel like I could connect anymore. And I started hearing from people that it was so authentic to them and so important for them and so healing for them to be able to restore that connection that they had wanted to have all along. And so I am just very passionate about that. And one of my mentors says, people will very rarely question a belief system until in some way it fails to produce for them. And so the good news is, your beliefs do create your life. If you have beliefs in any area that work for you and you're happy and you're thriving and you're healthy, then great, right? The only reason to have this discussion is if the beliefs are not working for you in some way, right? But just a couple weeks ago, I did an intensive around the start of the year, and I knew we were going to talk about money and God and receiving and all these things that are all interconnected. And so I get on the intensive and I asked the person at the beginning, I said, just to give me a little context, what are your foundational beliefs about yourself, about God, and about money? And again, this is an intensive, so that's not necessarily like a normal coaching question for me, but I'm like, we got a one-time experience. So like, we got to dive in here. This is the accelerated mode.
Yes,
So I said, what beliefs do you have that exist going into this about God, money, receiving, whatever the other one was? And I got to tell you, we got stuck at the God piece because they said, well, I guess I believe in God. I said, okay, what else do we believe? And that's really it. And I said, there's three categories of beliefs that we could have about something. There's negative beliefs, there's neutral beliefs, and there's positive beliefs. Now, I'd rather you be in a neutral zone than negative. I believe in God, that's it. Well, that's neutral. That's fine. Not the worst. I'd rather you be in neutral than God hates me, God's mad at me, God is mad at me, God is going to punish me. But I said, what I would offer to you that is a zone that is available is positive, supportive, healing, nourishing, empowering beliefs about God. So for example, in your story, the belief that God actually cares about the things that matter to you, or the belief that God is a source who knows how to provide for you and knows how to get it to you, or the fact that God cares about your happiness and your safety and your joy. I told her these are in the realm of positive beliefs about God. And it does so much more for you when you're in that realm, not just neutral.
Yeah.
But people come to me from the whole spectrum. And sometimes people come to me with a positive belief place ready to grow. Sometimes people come to me from a neutral place and they want to build some positive. Sometimes people come to me from a negative space and it's hard for them to even hear the word God, but they're there. And I acknowledge them for that.
I'll tell you, that's all wonderful. And I agree. And I know for me, even in my world, in my business, even in my hosting world, I should say that, hosting more stuff, I do feel more like I'm at service now. I'm not just doing this. Like I feel like I have a purpose. I got repurposed. Like, you know what, James? I'm gonna do shows that bring me joy and that possibly bring others joy too. And it could be reviewing a Star Wars show on Disney Plus. It could be a soap opera on CBS, but it also could be a talk like this. I decided to open myself up to the content portion of what I'm going to give out, and I've been watching your content and seeing your content. I agree, but I feel like my belief system has actually morphed me into a constant place of I'm serving. I am serving a community, wherever that community is, like whether it's the Star Wars community or the Hardys or this. But I feel like everything that I do, and I've been noticing the views are bigger, they're going up. The fans are more talking, there's more engagement. I don't care if you have 568,000 followers on Instagram, and some people have that. I guess you can buy them too sometimes. When I see no engagement, I'm being shady on purpose. If I don't see engagement, I'm questioning. I see engagement on your post. I see engagement on your YouTube stuff. I see engagement on your stuff. And that to me impresses me because I think that's what you want. You want to create this community. You want people to actually, whether it's good reactions or bad, you want reactions. And that's kind of I'm looking at people's stuff now, going, you might have a nice little message here and there, but I'm like, why is nobody talking with you? What's going on? You have all these followers and all these things and stuff. I'm like, are you really serving or are you self-serving? And so I always look at both of those. And then for me, God has told me, oh no, James, now you're serving, James, and you're giving people the content they must be looking for because they're responding.
Well, I think there's no substitute for living with purpose and showing up with purpose because you can't fake it, right?
Yeah.
It's like if you fake I'm showing up with a purpose, but it's really with an agenda, it's just not going to land. Um, and energy is real, and I think people feel those things. And, you know, something I feel very committed to with anything I put out into the world now is let me make sure that I have something to say. And with the teachings, for example, sometimes I'll put one out every week. Sometimes it's every 10 days. Sometimes it's every 2 or 3 weeks. But it's interesting because one of the things that I don't know what, I mean, I do know, but it's kind of a long list. But there were a lot of factors that started me getting to think, not trying to calculate a 10-year plan, but thinking, what is going to matter in 10 years? I think that's a good shift. Not let me calculate because I can plan every detail of my life 10 years from now, but rather what is still going to matter 10 years from now. And, one thing I'm very clear on, not to be morbid, but what nearly everybody cares about on their deathbed is, and I don't want to say a word that will get you bleeped on YouTube. So let
Oh,
me re-say it. But what everybody cares about on their unalive bed,
yes. Oh, yes.
um,
Oh, yes. Yes. Yes.
what everybody cares about is people.
Yeah.
And they don't care about trophies there. They don't care about degrees and diplomas. They care about people. And I think when you show up with purpose, when you show up for people, um, it's just a different level of living. And I think, I'm not saying that every single teaching I put out there is equivalent or whatever, but I I'm certainly always trying my best to have something to say that will be meaningful and helpful and impactful for people's lives. And I just think it can't be taken for granted. There are so many people whose goal is just, okay, we got to put content out there and it's got to look like Alex Hermosi, or we got to put content out there and we got to maximize views. And you can do all of that. But I do think there's something to be said for if you're playing the long game and actually building something with a purpose, you know, what matters most is not the immediate quick hit dopamine of the numbers you produce. What matters is the people and the relationships and the emotional connection and the impact on their lives. And anyway, that's my perspective on it.
I agree with that. I'm like, I got another interview after you, and I'm like, I could talk to you forever, Stephen. You have to come back. You just have to come back. You have to come
I
back.
guess I will.
Gonna come back. Yes, you're great. You're a joy. So thank you for all you do in the world, trying to serve the world also, and make human beings look into themselves and do better. I think it's what you're doing. You're trying to make them just a little better, and it's like, so we make the world go round a little better. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for having these conversations. And thank you for being light in everything that you do. I think the good thing about light is it's not something that does, it's just something that is. And whether you are talking about Star Wars or soaps or anything else, you are light showing up in all spaces. So thank you for being you and doing that.
Thank you. StephenLovegrove.us. Go there. Start there, and then you can go from everywhere else. And then you can find him on all social media platforms, of course. He's there. He's everywhere, so you can find him. But go there first. Go to StephenLovegrove.us. And I'm James Lott Jr. You can find where all James Lott Jr.'s are sold at James Lott Jr. on all social media platforms, alottahelp.com, and our Facebook page is a lot of help also. Have faith. Try to have some faith. And if you can't seem to find it, find someone who can help you. There are lots of coaches out there. There's lots. They're out there and they're here to help you, or professional organizers. They're here to help you. There are professionals out there who are here to help you. There's no shame in getting someone to assist you and moving on to the next part of your life. I'm James Lott Jr. Talk to you next time.